Have you ever heard a voice calling from beneath the waves? Not the soft hush of ocean currents or the distant echo of submerged rocks, but a desperate cry, ancient, broken, and pleading for rescue. In the dead silence of forgotten maps lies a place erased from history, swallowed by time, drowned by a curse no one dares speak of. A town once alive with laughter, market bells, and whispered secrets now lingers beneath murky depths, its people lost, yet not gone. They wait and they call. Still, some say the waters churn at night for no reason, that shadows swim where fish should be, that those who listen too closely hear names not their own whispered back, and those who dive in search of truth rarely return the same. Welcome to Varadora, once a thriving coastal gem, now a ghost town submerged and suffocating in its watery grave. But this town has a heart, and it still beats. So ask yourself this: would you dare dive into the forgotten? Would you answer a cry for help if it came from the deep? Drop your thoughts in the comments. What do you think lies beneath? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you're ready to take the plunge into one of the darkest tales never told. This is just the beginning. The storm struck without warning. It had been a clear evening, skies streaked with amber light, the gulls wheeling over the bay, and the salty wind brushing against the cliffs of Varadora like an old friend's hand. Fishermen hauled in their final nets. Market stalls closed one by one. Children raced down cobbled paths chasing fireflies. The bell tower chimed 6 times, each toll echoing like a heartbeat over the sea. Then everything changed. Darkness rolled in, not like the night, but like a living thing. It smothered the horizon, swallowing the sun with impossible speed. The wind died. The gulls vanished mid-screech. The sea stilled as if holding its breath. Elias Thorne, the town's lighthouse keeper, stood frozen at the top of his post. He squinted into the encroaching gloom, heart thudding in his chest. Below him, the ocean wasn't rising or falling. It was just watching. A shrill scream pierced the air. It came from the east end near the cemetery, the oldest part of Varadora, long rumored to be cursed by the first settlers. Thorne grabbed his lantern, descended the spiral stairs 2 at a time, and ran into the churning blackness. By the time he reached the cemetery gates, the rain had begun. Not gentle, not expected. Each drop fell with a sharp hiss, leaving trails of steam as if touching fire. The scream had stopped, but something else replaced it. Whispers. Not one, not two, but dozens, maybe hundreds. Voices too low to understand, but unmistakably human. Thorne's lantern flickered violently. The iron gates, once rusted shut, now hung wide open. Fog snaked through the tombstones. Something moved between them, fast, jerky, like limbs didn't know how to bend properly anymore. He took a cautious step forward. "Leave!" A voice rasped behind him. He spun around. No one. "Leave!" It hissed again, this time from the right. Thorne raised the lantern. There was something standing in the mist. A silhouette. Female. Pale dress clinging to her soaked form. Her face was veiled in shadow, hair hanging like wet ropes. "Ma'am," Thorne called, his voice quivering. "Do you need help?" Her head tilted. Lightning struck, and for a split second, her face was revealed. Empty sockets where eyes should have been. Her mouth stretched into an inhuman grin. Blood ran from her ears. She opened her jaw wider than any bone should allow and screamed. Thorne dropped the lantern. Everything went dark. 3 weeks later, Varadora was gone. Satellite images showed nothing where the town once stood, just an endless sheet of black water. No buildings, no roads, no life. It was as if the ocean had decided to erase it completely, but the survivors knew better. There were only 5 of them, pulled from the water by a passing cargo ship. They were found clinging to pieces of driftwood, incoherent, their skins shriveled as if they'd been submerged for days. Yet Varadora had vanished only hours before. No one spoke for the first few days. The doctors said they were too traumatized. But when they finally did, their stories chilled the blood. Voices calling from the sea, faces peering from beneath the surface, dead relatives walking the streets. Hallucinations or warnings? One name kept resurfacing in each account: Elira Wynne, a young girl drowned over a century ago, buried in the oldest part of Veradora. Legend claimed her mother had tried to resurrect her, using forbidden rites passed down from her own bloodline of sea priests. The ritual failed, or perhaps succeeded too well. The girl was never seen again, but the tide never flowed right in Veradora after that day. Present day, Southern Oceanographic Research Institute. Dr. Nara Voss stared at the readings on her monitor, a knot tightening in her stomach. Depth anomaly confirmed. Pressure's all wrong. No geothermal activity. It's like something's hollow beneath the sea floor. She ran a trembling finger along the edge of the monitor. The sonar pulse returned again, soft and rhythmic. But dumb, but dumb, but dumb. Heartbeat? Her assistant murmured. Impossible, Voss whispered. Unless... She didn't finish. They all heard it then. Every speaker in the lab emitted a single, distorted word. Help! Somewhere off the coast. Charter vessel. Midnight gale. Reed Callahan adjusted his diving harness, checking the seals one last time. The boat rocked gently, though the sea beneath them looked far too calm for the stories they'd heard. He glanced at his partner, Jules Marrow, who loaded the sonar probes. You really think it's all true? Jules asked. An entire town vanished. Just like that? I don't know what I believe, Reed muttered, tightening a strap. But they're paying us a fortune to find out. The crew grew quiet as they neared the coordinates. The water turned a shade darker, reflecting no light. Even birds avoided the sky above it. A cold wave slammed the boat. Suddenly, every compass on board spun wildly. The electronics shorted out. The engines stalled. The captain cursed and tried to restart the system. Nothing worked. Reed and Jules exchanged a look. They were already suited up. Might as well finish the job. The moment they hit the water, something was off. It wasn't the temperature, it was the silence. The ocean had no voice here. No bubbles, no current, no fish. Their lights cut through the gloom, but the deeper they dove, the stranger things became. Shapes drifted through the water. Impossible structures. Broken rooftops, a crooked street lamp, a child's tricycle half buried in sand. Then they saw it. Veradora, still intact, still standing, resting on the sea floor like it had been gently laid there. Houses, shops, even the church with its broken steeple. It was all there, but something pulsed from within the buildings, like breath. Jules grabbed Reed's arm. There's someone watching us, he said through the comm. Reed turned and froze. Figures hovered between the ruins. They wore the clothes of the drowned. Their mouths moved, slow and soundless, eyes wide with terror or hunger. One of them reached forward, fingers bone-white and cracking at the joints. Let's move, Reed shouted, but it was too late. The current surged from nowhere, dragging them downward with impossible force. Their tethers snapped. Their lights blinked out. And in the pitch-black depths, something whispered to them in a voice that was not human. You came, finally. Reed's vision flickered between pitch black and bursts of green as his light struggled to stay alive. The crushing silence of the deep enveloped him like a wet shroud. Pressure coiled around his skull, squeezing it tighter with every second. He reached for his comm. Static. Jules was gone. Something moved past him, just barely visible. A face. Pale, lips stitched shut. A child's hand reached toward his visor from the darkness, then vanished. Reed kicked upward, but the water wouldn't let him rise. It was like swimming through molasses, thick, slow, sentient. Then a voice inside his helmet, not from the comm. Don't run! He spun in panic. No one. His oxygen gauge blinked red. He had minutes, maybe less. But then, faintly through the murk, a flickering light. A street lamp. Impossible. He swam toward it, every instinct screaming to turn back. The deeper he went, the more the darkness changed. Buildings appeared, not broken and drowned, but alive, lit from within, as though the town was still functioning. But there were no people. Only the sound of footsteps echoing off cobblestone streets. Underwater. He surfaced into air. Reed gasped, lungs greedily filling with stale, musty oxygen. He floated in the middle of Veradora's main square, completely dry now, his gear dripping onto old stone. The sky above was black, no stars, no clouds. Just void. Walls melted, streets bent in impossible angles. A shop he passed 3 times now had a bloodied handprint on its sign. Lamps sputtered and bled wax that smelled like burned flesh. He stopped in front of the church. The steeple leaned like it was bowing to him, the doors wide open, inviting. Something inside moved. He stepped forward. Elsewhere, above water, Jules gasped awake. His suit was torn. He lay on the deck of the midnight gale, alone. Night had fallen, but it was silent. Too silent. No waves, no wind, no stars. His dive logs were corrupted. His suit camera looped a single frame. Reed's face, mouth open in terror. He looked over the edge of the boat. The water was boiling, not from heat, but from movement. Shapes swirled just beneath the surface. Dozens, hundreds. Bodies writhing in slow, hypnotic patterns. Faces staring up at him with desperate, pleading expressions. One of them looked exactly like him. He screamed. From below deck, something knocked. Meridora! The church. The pews were shattered. The stained glass windows depicted things no church should ever depict. Rituals, sacrifices, drownings in bathtubs lined with salt, sea creatures kneeling before children. At the altar stood the woman again. Elira, she said. Reed froze. You're Elira Wynn? No, she smiled. Elira lives here. The floor split open. Beneath the altar, a staircase of bones spiraled into darkness. From the depths, a wet sucking sound echoed up, a heartbeat of the drowned. I can't go down there, Reed whispered. You already did, she replied. You were always going to. The room blinked. Suddenly, he was standing at the bottom of the stairs, breathless. Walls pulsed like lungs. Something massive breathed around him. Voices chanted low, in a language he didn't know, but understood. She will rise. We will drown. The water is her cradle. He turned and saw her. The real Elira. A girl of maybe 10. Skin porcelain white. Eyes glowing green with bioluminescent intensity. Her arms were stitched at the elbows, her feet dragging as she floated forward. Around her water hovered, liquid suspended in air like a cloak. You heard me, she whispered. You listened. Reed shook his head. I didn't mean to. But you did, she hissed. And now, you belong. The walls cracked. Floodwater burst in. Reed screamed as the tide swallowed him, pulling him backward through the tunnels, slamming him against walls, dragging him towards something far worse than death. Through it all, he heard her voice, inside his skull, in his teeth, vibrating in his bones. Help me, Reed. Then, silence. Back on land. Southern Oceanographic Research Institute. Dr. Voss sat in a sealed chamber, watching the footage from the dive. Reed and Jules both went under. Only Jules came up. The final frame showed something impossible. The camera on Reed's chest had caught a single flash of Veradora, underwater, glowing, alive. But in the corner of the screen, a figure stood at a window, staring directly into the lens. It was Elira, but she smiled this time. Then the screen went black. A knock on the lab door made her jump. It was a child, dripping wet, barefoot. No one had let her in. The child stood in the hallway, water pooling beneath her feet, eyes wide and lifeless like empty moons. Her clothes hung in soaked tatters, stuck to her frail body. Dr. Voss stared, frozen. Her logical mind screamed that this wasn't possible, that a child couldn't just appear inside a secured facility, especially one reeking of salt and decay. Where are your parents? Voss managed, her voice barely a whisper. The girl didn't speak. Instead, she raised her arm and pointed toward the glass chamber, where the footage from Reed's dive still looped. The lights in the hallway dimmed, flickered, then burst one by one as she walked forward, slow, deliberate, dragging her feet like someone being pulled back with every step. Voss backed into the lab, heart pounding in her throat. She snatched the emergency phone and dialed security. Nothing, not even a dial tone. She looked up. The child was gone. All that remained was water, It trickled from the hallway into the lab, shimmering with a faint green glow. Something was in it, tiny wriggling organisms. No, eyes. Dozens. Staring up at her, unblinking. The screen in front of her blinked violently. It displayed a map of the southern trench, where Veradora had once stood. The sonar pulse returned again. Badum, badum, badum. But this time, there were words encoded into the frequency. One returns, one remains. One will open the gate. Somewhere deep, Veradora's underbelly. Reed's body ached, his lungs burned, but he was still alive. The tunnel had spat him out into an enormous cavern, half submerged in water, half carved from stone and bone. Columns lined the chamber, etched with symbols that shimmered under a light that had no source. They pulsed like veins carrying blood that glowed blue. He lay on a slab, arms bound by seaweed that slithered and twitched with life. Something moved along the edges of the cavern. Tall figures with elongated limbs, their faces hidden behind barnacle-covered masks. They whispered in chorus too low to understand, but he could feel the pressure in his skull from their voices. Above him, carved into the rock ceiling, was a mural. It showed Veradora, the town, sinking. But it wasn't a natural disaster. It was a sacrifice. Dozens of figures knelt at the shoreline, arms raised while a massive figure with a child's face and a body of tentacles loomed above them. Illyra. She wasn't a victim. She was a god. A drop of water fell onto his forehead. Then another. The slab tilted. Water flooded in from every direction. As Reed thrashed, struggling to breathe, the figure stepped back, bowing low. Their whispers grew louder. He caught a fragment. The vessel awakens. Then from the water beside him, a hand grabbed his wrist. Jules, soaked, eyes wild, shaking with panic. Reed, we have to move. Now. 1 hour earlier, Jules escaped. Jules had locked himself inside the engine room of the Midnight Gale. Every bolt sealed. Outside, something circled the boat, dragging fingernails, no claws, against the hull. Every light flickered. Then a voice, Reed's voice. Jules, I'm okay. Open the hatch. But Jules knew it wasn't Reed. The voice lacked breath. It sounded too perfect, too even, and it came from every speaker at once. He screamed and climbed through the emergency escape shaft, launching himself into the water. Below the surface, the ocean parted for him, literally parted, like a throat opening. He was pulled downward, but not drowned. The water felt warm, alive, like it wanted him alive. He woke up in Veradora. Everything was wrong. The town was upside down, buildings suspended above him, as if hanging from invisible strings, streets twisting into spirals, staircases leading into skyless voids. Shadows crawled across the walls, whispering secrets he tried to forget immediately. But he had found Reed, and now they ran. Veradora, the courthouse ruins. The two men sprinted through collapsing arches, past doors that led nowhere. Behind them, the water wasn't chasing, it was watching. Faces formed in the puddles beneath their feet, tracking their movement, grinning. I saw Illyra, Reed gasped. She's not a ghost, she's a god, or a monster. She's the reason the town sank. Jules panted, looking around wildly. Then why the hell does she need help? A voice echoed through the ruined town. Because I never wanted this. Illyra stood at the center of the square. Her form was flickering. One moment a child, the next a creature too large to exist. Tentacles rippled in and out of her dress. Her smile trembled with sadness. I didn't ask to be born like this, she whispered. They made me. My mother, my blood, the rituals. I was meant to save them. Reed stepped forward, hand trembling. Then what happened? Her eyes filled with black tears. They bound me, called me salvation. But when I opened the gate, it wasn't heaven that answered. It was the deep. The sky cracked overhead. An unholy sound poured from above. A horn ancient and wrong, as if reality itself was howling. The buildings began to lift, tearing from the ocean floor, floating upward, like broken toys. The town was ascending, but not toward air, toward something worse. The gate opens again. Illyra said, one of you must stay. The ground splintered beneath their feet. Reed grabbed Jules. Run, Illyra said, calmly. The air grew heavy. The sky above split open, revealing something watching, something vast, with eyes the size of ships, tentacles the length of cities. It was not of earth, sea, or sky, and it was waiting. Back on land, the Institute Dr. Voss gathered her belongings with shaking hands. She had seen enough. The data was corrupted, but her instincts screamed truth. The girl, the whisper, the footage, it was all real. She booked a private vessel. She would go to the trench herself, not to explore, to close the gate. As she left her lab, she didn't see the puddle forming behind her, or the child standing at the far end of the hallway, head tilted, smiling, whispering to no one. She's coming. The trench loomed like a wound in the earth. All Lyris, black, endless, and alive. The ocean had fallen still the moment Dr. Voss's private vessel, the Aether Pike, crossed into Veridora's coordinates. Even the sonar stopped working properly, sending garbled data that looped into a singular word, again and again. Oh! Oh! She stood on the deck as the submersible was prepped. The crew, 3 divers, an engineer, and the silent captain, moved like sleepwalkers. Their eyes were glazed, faces blank. She hadn't noticed it at first, but now the realization struck her like a blade. They hadn't blinked once, and beneath the boat, something scraped its nails along the hull. Below, Veridora's catacombs, lead, and Jules crouched behind a crumbling archway, in what might have once been a library. Though the books were long rotted and melted into the walls, they dripped ink like blood, spelling words across the stone floors in slow crawling tendrils. All Lyris. Do not speak her name. Illyra had vanished after the sky opened. The town began to shift again. Lead. Reforming, as though Veridora was trying to remember itself. The streets now bent upward, forming a spiral toward the black sky. Every so often, the air would shimmer and reveal other versions of the city. Lead. Burned frozen, upside down, they flickered like reflections in broken glass. She said one of us has to stay, Jules muttered. What the hell does that mean? Reed shook his head. I think it's a trade, to keep the gate shut. And if we refuse, as if in answer, a scream tore through the air, inhuman, stretched, endless. It didn't come from a person. It came from beneath, from what waited below. They moved through the ruins quickly, now, careful not to touch the water that seeped from every crack. It wasn't normal anymore. It hissed when it touched skin. It whispered when they turned away. Then they saw it. The graveyard. It wasn't filled with tombstones, but mirrors, dozens of them, standing upright in the seabed. Each one cracked, fogged, smeared with blood, and each mirror showed a different version of Reed and Jules. Some older, some younger, some dead, hanging, drowned. One version of Reed grinned and waved, before slamming his own face into the glass, over and over until it shattered. I'll lead. They froze in place, as one of the mirrors began to hum. Jules stepped forward. No. Reed grabbed his arm. Lead. Pull. But it was too late. Inside the mirror, Jules opened his eyes to silence. He was in Veridora, but it was perfect. Oh. Sunlight bathed the cobblestone. Children laughed. Bells rang. The ocean glittered peacefully. At the edge of the cliff, Reed sat on a bench nearby, smiling, older gray at the temples. He looked relaxed, content. You made it. Lead. Mirror, Reed said. Jules blinked. This isn't real, isn't it? Mirror, Reed gestured. You could stay. Illyra doesn't want pain. She wants to be remembered. Worshipped. We can make that happen. She just needs someone to be her voice. Jules looked down at his hands. They were webbed. He screamed. Back in the real. Oh! Back in the real. Back in the real. Veridora. Jules gasped and collapsed, trembling violently. Reed yanked him away from the mirror as the glass cracked and spilled black water onto the ground. From the shattered reflection crawled a thing. It looked like Jules, but taller, skin pale, and stretched. No eyes, no mouth, just gills and a soundless scream. It reached toward them. Reed fired the flare gun they'd taken from a storage locker in the market ruins. The creature exploded into steaming liquid and dissolved into the dirt. Jules looked at his reflection in a nearby puddle. Lead.
His face flickered between his own and the monster's. Reed, what if it's already inside me? We'll figure it out. We always do. But he wasn't sure. Not anymore.
I topside.
The descent doctor, Voss, entered the submersible alone. She'd locked the crew out after one of them whispered her name backward in a voice that sounded like Alira's. The captain hadn't spoken once since the trip began, until an hour ago, when he began humming a lullaby that Voss remembered from a dream. She didn't ask questions. She sealed the hatch. The ether pike descent into the trench with quiet resistance. Pressure wrapped around the hull, but something else touched it too, like hands dragging the vessel downward. Her screen filled with noise, static, then suddenly, a live feed. Veradora, lit up like a city on a festival night. Streets aglow, music, dancing, but it was wrong. People twisted and twitched, some floating midair, others burning slowly while smiling. In the center of it all stood Alira, but not as a child anymore. Now she was a woman, impossibly tall, her arms stretching like branches, her mouth stitched closed, but still somehow singing. And in her arms, Reed and Jewel, floating, bound. Her eyes snapped toward the camera. Dr. Voss dropped the controls. The feed went dark. Back in the deep, the tower. Reed and Jules had made it to the tower at Veradora's center. It had once been the mayor's office, a symbol of power. Now it pulsed like a heart, and it breathed. Each step upward was harder than the last. Time bent, gravity reversed. Words etched into the walls twisted in real time, forming new sentences with every glance. You were chosen. She is not the enemy. She is the beginning. At the top of the tower, they found the Chamber of Names. It was a dome of glass and bone. The ceiling showed the real world, above the surface. And in the center of the room, a pool of black water shimmered. Jules stepped toward it. It's a way out. No, Reed said, remembering Alira's voice. It's a doorway, but not to home. The water parted, and Alira rose again. Choose, she whispered. One must stay. Her arms stretched toward them, offering peace in one hand, destruction in the other. The gate trembled. Something massive pressed against the glass walls of reality, and the water started rising again. The chamber trembled as Alira hovered above the black pool, her form phasing between the young girl she once was and the eldritch horror she was becoming. Reed and Jules stood at the edge, frozen, hearts pounding, as her dual voices echoed across the walls. One innocent, one monstrous, one must stay. Outside, the city groaned. Buildings moaned as if mourning. The sky above the dome bled red, cloudless and infinite. From the cracks in the walls, shadows slithered inward, not cast by light, but crawling on their own volition. They crept along the walls, whispering names. Their names. Jules reached for the pool, hand trembling. The surface rippled not with water, but with memories. Images of his mother, of his first time diving with Reed, of Veradora above water, the way it might have once been. He gasped, eyes wide. I see everything. Reed pulled him back. No, that's what she wants. That's how she feeds. Alira's smile cracked wider. I offer truth. I offer eternity. You call it horror, but you only fear what you cannot understand. Behind her, the tower walls began to dissolve, revealing a vision of the city before it sank. Townspeople stood in the square, silent, weeping. The mayor, a tall man with hollow eyes, stood before a pulpit, holding a child swaddled in kelp. Alira, they chanted. Bind the vessel. Seal the gate. She will save us. Then came the waves. Not just water, teeth, tendrils, shadows made of screams. The townspeople were dragged under, their bodies absorbed into the black ocean like ink. Reed staggered back. They didn't just sacrifice her, they merged with her. She is the city, Jules whispered. Veradora didn't sink. It transformed. Above, the ether piked the second. Dr. Voss gripped the submersible controls, knuckles white, as sonar alarms screamed. She had descended deeper than any human had dared. Yet the trench continued to open. The darkness around her wasn't just lack of light. It was a presence, a tangible nothingness that pressed against the glass, whispering promises into her skull. The walls of the trench were no longer rock. They were faces, stretched and wailing. Thousands of them. Eyes bulging, mouths gaping. Hands clawed from the shadows, reaching toward her vessel. One of them looked like her. She screamed and shut her eyes. But the face remained, and it spoke. "Help me." The instruments exploded in sparks. The lights went out, then came a low hum. No machinery, no sonar. Just a deep, vibrating harmony that shook her soul. The water around her began to churn, parting to reveal Veradora. Not its ruins, the city, fully restored, standing in the void. At its center the tower glowed, a beacon. She knew Reed and Jules were inside, and so was something else. Back in the tower, the ground cracked beneath their feet. The floor opened slowly like the petals of a rotted flower, revealing a pit of lightless water. From it rose hundreds of hands, some human, some not. They clawed at the air, reaching, begging. Reed backed away. "She's not giving us a choice. She's building a vessel, out of us." Jules gritted his teeth, pulling a flare knife from his belt. "Then we destroy it. The gate, the pool, whatever that is, we end it. You destroy it," Alira said, her many eyes blinking in different directions. "And the entire world drowns." The air itself grew heavy. Pressure increased. Blood leaked from their noses. The water from the pit surged, rushing toward them like a living beast. Reed and Jules turned and ran, slipping down a side stairwell just before the wave hit. The stairs screamed beneath their feet. Yes, screamed. Each step bellowed a name, a memory, a fear. Jules stumbled. A hand burst from the wall, grabbing his leg. He slashed at it, the flare knife igniting on contact, searing through the pale flesh. The arm recoiled, but the wall bled. Thick black ichor pouring out, forming words in midair. "You will never leave. Nice, through the tunnels, escape or illusion." The stairwell dropped them into another chamber. This one unlike the rest. It was modern. Fluorescent lights flickered. A desk sat in the center, papers strewn about, coffee mug half full. It looked like their lab. Reed walked forward in a daze. This is where we were before the expedition." Jules checked the monitor on the wall. It showed the footage from Reed's dive, perfectly clear, no distortions. Then the footage changed. It showed them now, running, hiding. Then a close-up of Reed sleeping, right now, in real time. He looked up. "That's not possible." The monitor blinked, and new text appeared. "You are asleep. You never left. Wake up." Jules slapped Reed. "Snap out of it, man. This is Alira. She's tricking us." The room melted, not slowly, instantly. Walls became seaweed. The lights turned to bioluminescent worms. The desk liquefied into a pulsating mass of tongues, and they were back in Veradora. But now, something was hunting. The hunter footsteps echoed in the distance, metallic, deliberate, not from Alira, from something worse. They ran again, through narrow alleys and sideways buildings. As the temperature dropped, frost spread across the stone, breath visible. A new figure emerged behind them, towering, armored, faceless, a warden, an ancient guardian of the gate, forged from the bodies of drowned townsfolk. Its body glimmered with faces screaming beneath its skin. In one hand it held a long staff, tipped with a lantern burning black fire. It didn't walk, it glided. Every step turned the ground to ash. Reed and Jules ducked into a collapsed church, hiding beneath the altar. The warden passed, dragging the staff slowly, sniffing the air without a nose. Reed whispered, "She's losing control. This thing, it's not part of her. It wants the gate for itself." Jules looked at the walls, now painted with images that changed every time you blinked. "We have to find the core, the heart of this place. Destroy that, and we might have a shot, or we kill the warden." Outside, the lantern's black fire lit up the street, and the gate trembled once more. The warden's lantern burned brighter as it hovered before the crumbling cathedral. Black fire licked the ancient stones, consuming not only matter but time, entire moments unraveling in its wake. Statues wept blood, bells chimed without sound. Reed and Jules crouched behind the altar, breath held, listening to the unnatural hum radiating from the monstrous sentinel. It was sensing them. No eyes, no ears, only a mask forged from bone and rust, etched with symbols that crawled when you looked too long. It didn't hunt with sight, it hunted with memory, and the longer they waited, the more they began to forget. Jules Reed whispered, "What's my sister's name?" Jules blinked. What are you talking about?" Reed shook him. "I had a sister. You knew her, but now, it's gone. Her name, her face." Jules's lips trembled. "She's taking it from us." Outside, the warden turned. The black lantern swung slowly toward the doors. Inside the cathedral, the descent, they bolted through a side passage as the warden entered, the doors melting in its wake. The walls of the corridor, wept thick, red liquid, trickling down from stained glass windows that no longer showed saints, but Alira. In each image, she was different, child, woman. Below the floor, something massive stirred, not a heartbeat, a chant. Reed stumbled as vision struck him, a child submerged in oil, a choir of tongues writhing beneath the waves, Alira's stitched mouth opening to reveal rows of teeth, and a single golden key. "Do you see it?" Jules asked, clutching his head. "The ocean, it's not water anymore, it's thought, it's all of them." The city's minds screaming. They emerged into a circular chamber carved from coral and bone. In its center, hovered a single object, a rusted compass. Its needle spun erratically, until Reed approached, then froze, pointing downward, toward a staircase, spiraling into the depths. Beneath them, the chant grew louder. Jules took a deep breath. "We go down. This is it, the core." Reed nodded. "We end this." Below, the core of Verador. The staircase led to a pit of silence. No sound, no breath, no heartbeats. The tunnel ended in a cavern of impossible geometry. Walls that moved, angles that shouldn't exist. Floating stones carried runes that bled light. Dozens of glass coffins floated midair, each containing a copy of someone they knew. Reed's mother, Jules' twin, Alira, again and again, and in the center, the core, a massive sphere, translucent and swirling with memories. Inside it, suspended like an insect in amber, was a heart, not human, not organic, made of shadow and stars. It pulsed slowly. When it beat, they remembered everything they had forgotten, and more. Reed staggered. This is where the gate opens, where Alira became." Jules stepped forward. "So we destroy it." He raised the flare knife, and brought it down. The blade shattered. No sound, just sudden screaming in their minds. The coffins shattered. The doubles awoke, and began to crawl. The broken mind Reed backed into a corner, as his mother's duplicate dragged itself from the shards, face split vertically, jaw unhinged. She wept words backward. Another copy of Jules leapt onto the ceiling, limbs bending the wrong way. Alira's versions laughed in unison, their stitched mouths popping open like rotten fruit. They attacked. Reed grabbed a rusted pipe from the floor, and swung, cracking through his double's face. Jules ducked under his twin's leap, shoving him into a jagged wall that swallowed him whole. "Alira wants us to break," Jules shouted, swinging at another. "She feeds on our pain, on our memories. This place is alive with grief." The heart pulsed again. Vision slammed into Reed, his sister being drowned, not by water, but words. Whole sentences spoken in forgotten tongues wrapped around her like chains. He screamed, "Focus," Jules shouted. Reed looked down. His hand was glowing. No, not his hand. The compass. It pulsed in time with the core. The key within Reed raised the compass. The core responded. The sphere split like glass under heat, unraveling into threads of light that hovered in the air. Inside, the heart twisted, sprouting spines, revealing a keyhole at its center. Jules froze. It's not the heart, it's the lock. The real gate's deeper still. They reached in together. The moment their fingers touched the heart, the chamber inverted. The below world. They fell, weightless, thoughtless, through a void of screaming stars and drowning moons. Cities passed them in reverse. Creatures shaped like prayers drifted by, eyes like candles. They landed on a sea of black glass. Above them, Verador hovered upside down, chained to the void by tendrils of light. The warden stood at the edge of the glass sea, holding its lantern, now filled with their names. It walked toward them. Behind it, a door began to open. From it, she emerged, Alira, now complete. Her form spanned the sky, neither girl nor woman, neither flesh nor god. Stitched mouth split open to reveal galaxies. Her arms reached across dimensions, and in her eyes swam every soul of Verador. You were supposed to save me, she said, voice trembling across realities. Jules stepped forward. We didn't know, she wept. Each tear birthed new cities. Each sob drowned an bull. The warden raised its staff and struck the glass. It cracked. The choice reed raised the compass. It shone with impossible light. Alira screamed. The warden lunged. The ground split. They fell again. But this time, not through space, through time. They stood now, at the moment it began. The town square. The ritual. The chants. The mayor holding a young Alira, about to offer her to the gate. The crowd silent, afraid, doomed. Reed looked at Jules. This is the key. We can stop it here. Save her. But at what cost? Jules asked. We don't know what happens if she lives. They looked up at the sky. The stars were beginning to vanish, one by one, as if watching, as if waiting.
The wind in the town square was cold and dry, unusual for Veradora's typically humid coastal air. Reed and Jules stood among ghosts, veiled in time's haze, surrounded by townsfolk who were alive yet unaware, repeating motions, mouthing ancient chants with no sound. At the center of the cobbled plaza, a young Alira stood still. Her wide eyes stared at the looming gate being built from coral and obsidian. She wore white ceremonial robes stained with seawater and fear. The mayor stood behind her, lifting a blade of stone and bone high above his head. Reed gritted his teeth. We can't let this happen again. Jules grabbed his shoulder. You don't even know what this is. We're not just in the past, we're inside a memory, or a trap, or both. But Reed couldn't listen, not anymore. He stepped forward and the air fought back. The moment his foot hit the edge of the ritual circle, the sky cracked like a mirror. Light bled through, and with it something else. The warden, it dropped from above like a god fallen out of favor, its lantern now a pulsing heart wrapped in chains. Townsfolk didn't see it, didn't react. Their memory forms continued the ritual. Oblivious, the warden stomped forward, each step echoing like a drumbeat from another world. Reed drew the compass. It whirled like mad, then stopped, pointing directly at Alira. Her child form turned slowly and looked right at him. But the eyes were wrong. Too deep, too aware. I remember you now, she whispered. The break of time reality fractured. Suddenly they weren't in the past anymore. Or the present. They were in all of it. Jules stood in a hallway made of his childhood fears. Flickering lights. The sound of something crawling under floorboards. His mother's voice calling his name. Except she'd been dead for 10 years. Julian, the voice said sweetly. You left the door open. He turned. The hallway warped, twisted into a hospital room. His brother's the day he flatlined. But his brother sat up now, eyes black, grinning with a mouth full of nails. Help me, Jules. Let me in. He ran. He floated above Veradora, reversed in gravity as thousands of arms reached out from rooftops, waving, clawing, pulling at unseen threads in the sea. Then they all turned and spoke in unison. You never saved her. You never could. Alira's face formed in the sky, built from clouds, lightning crackling behind her gaze. I waited, she said, and you forgot. Reed and Jules fell from separate horrors into the same space, an endless library floating in the black. Each book pulsed, not pages but flesh. Each spine hummed. They stood in front of the librarian. It had no face, only a giant single eye in the center of its head, ringed with fingers instead of lashes. The creature motioned, and a tome floated down between them. It's titled The Final Breath of Veradora. Jules whispered. We're not just part of the story. We're writing it. Reed opened the book. Inside was a mirror. Their faces, then Alira's, and then a page they couldn't read, written in a language not made for human eyes.
Their eyes bled trying, but the message was clear. Return the memory. Break the anchor. Back to the ritual. Again they stood at the ritual. But this time, they knew. They remembered the anchor. It wasn't Alira. It was the song. The chant. The words themselves were the spell. An ancient binding. A summoning. They had to stop the song. Jules lunged forward. The warden appeared. Faster than ever, catching him mid-air and slamming him into the stones. The lantern burned through Jules's side, and he screamed, half in pain, half in rage. Reed raised the compass and screamed the only word he remembered from the book. Unmoor. A wave of force erupted from the compass, blasting the warden back. The people froze mid-chant. The mayor turned, blinking confused. The knife dropped from his hand. Young Alira stumbled forward, disoriented. I'm not supposed to remember this part, she said, weep. This is the part where I go. Reed ran to her. You don't have to. We can stop this. Let us help. But she was already changing. She hovered now, an in-between thing, half child, half eldritch nightmare, surrounded by chains of forgotten prayers. The sky screamed. The warden knelt. You see me as a monster, Alira said, but I was your sacrifice. I am your god now, because I was your victim first. Jules crawled forward, blood pooling beneath him. Then let us suffer instead. Alira paused. The chains unraveled. A gate began to open. Through it, nothing could be seen, except shadows shaped like cities, rivers of language, oceans of sorrow, and a presence. The true entity, older than Alira, older than gods. It called. Alira reached toward it. No, Reed shouted. You don't belong to them. You never did. She turned. Tears streaked her mutated face. I don't want to be alone anymore. The gate pulsed closer. Fingers of void reached for her, for them, for the world. Jules dragged himself to the compass and screamed one last word. Forget. The white silence. Not the kind that brings peace, but the oppressive, suffocating silence of a world not meant to exist. Reed floated in a vast nothingness, a colorless space, where even memory unraveled. His body had no weight. His thoughts scattered like ashes. For a moment he was no one. Then, a single whisper, you remembered me. He turned, or thought he did. There were no directions here. Alira stood, no longer the horror, no longer the child. A woman now, cloaked in seaweed and starlight. Her stitched mouth gone, replaced with a soft, sad smile. I tried to leave a way back, she said, voice trembling. In the dreams, in the blood, in the way the tide changed direction every seventh night. Reed choked. You knew we'd come. I prayed you would, she said. But hope is dangerous. In Veradora it always was. He looked down. There was no ground. Only more of the white. Where are we? Alira glanced around. The space between remembering and forgetting. The final breath. You chose to forget. Remember. Jules's last stand. Back in Veradora, Jules's scream had shattered more than just sound. It had cracked the chains of time itself. The gate, once yawning wide, now sputtered and convulsed. The shadows that emerged faltered, clawing at edges that no longer welcomed them. The sky turned crimson. Bells rang in reverse. The sea boiled upwards. Jules collapsed, barely breathing. The warden staggered, lantern dimming. It hissed, a sound like dying prayers. Then it lunged at Jules. Before it struck, something else descended from the sky. Alira, not as the horror, not as the girl, but as something reborn. She crashed into the warden, her touch turning it to smoke. The lantern shattered and names spilled out. Reed's, Jules's, thousands more. They scattered like fireflies, returning to the forgotten minds they'd been stolen from. Jules gasped. You remembered who you are. Alira looked down at him, glowing with sorrow. No, she said. You did. A door formed from lost moments. His sister's laughter, his father's last words. Jules's hand pulling him from the flood years ago. It pulsed, waiting. Alira stood beside him. You can walk through, she said. Go back. End it. Viradora will sleep. Reed stared at her. And you, I am the echo. I cannot leave. He clenched his fists. But I don't want to forget. I don't want to let you fade. Alira touched his cheek. You already forgot me once. I forgave you. Now I ask only one thing. Tears welled in her eyes. Don't let them do it to another. Reed turned to the door. Stepped through. Rebirth. The tide crashed against the cliffs as morning broke. Reed awoke face down on the wet stone, gasping, coughing up sea foam. Behind him Viradora lay quiet, half sunken, half risen. Buildings groaned. Lights flickered. For the first time in years the bells were silent. Jules limped beside him, clothes torn, face bruised, but alive. You made it, Jules rasped. So did you, Reed replied. They both turned. The gate was gone. So was the cathedral. Only a patch of still water remained. Calm, mirror-like. In its reflection, Alira stood, watching, then slowly faded from view. The survivors, the townsfolk emerged in the days that followed. Confused, traumatized. Some didn't speak. Others remembered only fragments like dreams, slipping away after waking. But they were free. Reed and Jules spent days helping rebuild. They pulled children from crumbled buildings, reconnected families long separated by fear and madness. No one questioned their knowledge. No one dared. Viradora had changed. So had they. The tomb below. Weeks later, Jules returned to the church ruins. Now just a field of shattered stone and coral. He found Reed there, standing in silence. You think she's still down there?
Yeah.
Jules asked. Reed didn't answer right away. Then softly, no. I think she's everywhere now. A ripple passed through the sea. The horizon shimmered. The book returns. One morning, a child found something buried in the sand. A water-damaged tome. Old. Breathing. Reed recognized it. The same book the librarian had shown them. He opened it. The pages were blank. Then words began to bleed through. Not written in blood. Not in ink. But in memory. Names. Dates. Places. And one phrase at the end. She is watching. She remembers. Never again. People laughed again. Danced. Dared to dream. But Reed never forgot. He saw the signs. Subtle. Whispered. Mirrors that didn't reflect right. Children singing songs no one taught them. The tide reversing on the seventh night. Jules noticed too. Once he awoke with seaweed wrapped around his wrist, spelling a name he didn't remember knowing. Alira. Jules joined him. Flashlight flickering. She's not gone, is she? Reed shook his head. No. She's just waiting. For what? Reed exhaled. For the world to forget again. Lightning cracked. The sea turned black. From its depths, bells began to toll once more. The end. If you've followed the journey all the way here, thank you. Which part gave you the deepest chills? Do you think Alira will return? Or was this her piece? Let me know in the comments below. And hey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with fellow lovers of suspense, horror, and mind-bending mysteries. There's more where this came from, and the next tale might be closer than you think.